Here.
Ms. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Sheridan?
Here.
Mr. Wright?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Thank you. If you haven't already turned off your cell phones, would you please do so at this time? Yes, like you. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2013 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Sheridan, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lopez, is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is time for anyone wishing to speak to the board about any item not on the agenda tonight. If there's anyone here, you need to come forward at this time. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We have no public meeting items. The next item is a public hearing on resolution number 2617-13, Oviedo Forest Special Exception Use Order. May we hear from the applicant, please? Would you state your name and address for the record?
Yes. Good evening. Tammy Corbett with Bowling Garner, North Main Street, Suite 2700. I am here tonight on behalf of Estancia Orlando. That's the owner of the property. And if you recall from last month, we're looking to review the special use exception order for Model Home Center at the Oviedo Forest. And when we were here last time, there was a lot of discussion about compliance with the conditions of the previous 2010 approval. And so what I'd like to do is go through attachment 3, which is the review of the biggest conditions of our compliance that are available or reasonable or not. I'd also like to give permission to approach, pass out color photos of the 5 point photos that are in your packet. Is that what I'll do?
Do you have enough of those to give the clerk one as well? Or okay.
It's probably going to be just enough to get all the way out.
Okay.
Well, actually, unfortunately, they're not collated. No, they're not.
Oh, gotcha. Take one from each.
I was told there'd be no math.
Which one? You got the only and also, I'm also submitting a supplement to that. Thank you. I apologize for that. Okay. Starting with the first condition, was all model homes should be constructed in compliance with the handicap accessibility requirements. Those are pursuant to Florida Accessibility Building Code and have been inspected and given COs by the city. The next item was the temporary sales trailer on Lot 93 and the 6-foot height fence that's on Lot 9, west property line of Lot 93. And I'd like to call your attention to Exhibit D, which is the photos that are of Lot 93, which is the last exhibit. So these are going to be these tree photos. And essentially, this is Lot 94, this is Lot 93 here. And there was never a sales trailer, actually. There's no permit pulled for a sales trailer. The sales trailer was never actually on that lot, and therefore there was never any need to install a screening fence on that lot. And so one was never installed. And to install one now, Deborah and I discussed, staff and I discussed whether or not it made sense to impose that condition at this point in time. But given the current site conditions with the trees and the grass and the vacant lot there, I think I think a fence would actually be more of an obstruction and actually detract from the aesthetics of the neighborhood. And I think staff concurred with that conclusion that it was better to install the trees that were there as opposed to installing a fence to buffer something that wasn't there. The other thing, we've talked about the term and the time length that the sales trailer could be on the site. That's another condition. That's the next condition. Again, there was never a trailer placed on there, so that wasn't necessary. Same thing with the setback requirements. Because the trailer was never utilized, the approval for the trailer was never utilized, those conditions were not applicable. Same thing with Type B building occupancy, the trailer was not used. Which takes us to the crosswalk between Lot 75 and 87 at Holly Springs Court. And that's actually your Exhibit A, which you have the color photos of the crosswalks in that area. And the crosswalks that were installed were part of the original infrastructure for the development, and the curb and gutter scheme and the sidewalk scheme was actually laid out at that time. And it was determined by staff that it was unsafe to place a crossing at that location. If you can see how when you have a ramp coming onto that, like onto the sidewalk for the accessible ramp, that essentially if you were to place that in the location where the condition was required, you'd be cutting into the curb cut and the drainage system. And so therefore, it essentially was determined by staff that that was not a safe location. And not only that the existing crosswalks serve the functional equivalent of the new crosswalk. And so that crosswalk was not installed. And then I'm going to skip this contribution and save that to last because I have a gentleman here who's going to provide some testimony, and I think just for flow it would be better for me to finish my part and then have him come up and talk to you about what happened with that condition, whether the work was completed or not. The condition about constructing no more than 2 homes of the same model at the same elevation next to each other has been complied with. However, the amendment to the covenants and restriction had not occurred previously. That is a supplement that I handed out to you. This is the amendment to the declaration that was recently signed, executed, and recorded. You had the unrecorded version in your packet. I've provided you with the recorded version from the clerk's office, so you can see that that condition is now complied with, not only just from a physical standpoint on site, it is now recorded in the covenants and restrictions of the development. And then we also went ahead and the new tree planting condition that was is in the new approval. We've actually gone ahead and filled out that hedge and planted those trees already, and those are shown in those photos at Exhibit D. So we wanted to avoid any concern about future compliance with conditions of the special use, and that was the only new condition, and we've gone ahead and complied with it. And at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Dan Roberts to come up and tell you what happened with respect to the remediation of the swale issue, and he can explain both the chronology of how the decisions were made, what payments were made, and how the work was done.
Thank you. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Dan Roberts. My address is 6038 Pine Valley Drive, Orlando. I have a long history with this property. I actually purchased the property for Ingle Homes when it was first being developed. I was in charge of their land operation for many years. Following, I think it was 2006, I retired from Ingle. And so I purchased the property back in the early 2000s. I developed it. I oversaw the site development. And so I've had a very long history with that. I currently am a consultant for the major landowner, Estancia, and I've worked with them since I retired from Engle in 2006. Excuse me. I also have been the president of the Oviedo Forest Homeowners Association since that time. So I know probably more about that community than most anyone else. As it relates specifically to the swale situation, I'd like to give you a little perspective and some history on that. When the project was originally developed and was approved by the water management, and the stormwater environmental resource permit was approved by St. Johns River Water Management District, there was a requirement, actually it was a suggestion, that a berm and swale be installed as the homes are built around the large borrow pit or retention pond in Phase 2, which is the gated portion of the community. During the berm and swale was to be put in at the time the homes were being built. So as a home was built, then the berm and swale would be put in at the shoreline. The purpose of that swale was to contain fertilizers and other nutrients that may be harmful to the water. So they requested that we put in the berm and swale. The city of Oviedo then made it a requirement that the berm and swales be built as a result of the development plan approval by the city, and refused to provide certificates of occupancy for those homes until the berm and swales were installed. And following that, some of the homeowners complained to the Water Management District that the berm and swales were sort of a mosquito pit, and they were collecting a lot of water, and they were a harboring place for bugs and mosquitoes. And so they contacted the Water Management District. The Water Management District told them that they did not require the berm and swales, but they suggested it. And so we went back to the Water Management District, and we asked them to provide us with a letter revising the requirements or that permit, which they did. And then we provided that we require that the homeowners not use any fertilizers within 25 feet from the normal high water line or from the edge of the shoreline. So, given that situation, some of the homeowners got involved with the city of Oviedo and asked the city to enforce the removal of those swales, even though that the city did require that those swales be constructed, and which they did, and they refused then to grant any further occupancy permits to the home builder until those swales were removed. So in our negotiations with the city originally thought that it was going to cost about $10,000 to remove the swales. And when Estancia came before this board and asked for the special exception to grant a model home permit, or permit for model homes, the city required that the swales be a condition, removal as a condition of the special exception, and that we would agree to contribute $10,000 to the cost of the removal of the swales. The city came back, and staff came back and said, well, we don't have any money to pay for any remediation if the cost comes out over and above the $10,000. And so, Mr. Landowner, it's going to be your responsibility to complete the remediation at your expense. And I was involved in most of the negotiations with the city at that time, and we offered to remit a check to the city for the $10,000 for that remediation. And they decided that they did not want that. They just wanted us to put the swales in. So after we got estimates to put the swales in, the cost to take out the swales, resod, relocate the irrigation, and so forth came out to a little over $25,000, almost $27,000 to do that. And my client, or the landowner, Estancia, ended up paying the entire bill for that at no cost to the city. I oversaw the production, both as a consultant for Estancia and as the president of the association, and I can attest to the fact that those swales were removed and that they were remediated with relocation of the irrigation and new sod put down. That was done shortly after the last application for the special exception. So I think I can, because of my experience, I think if you have any questions about the installation of that, I can certainly answer that. But we put them in, they're finished, and I think the homeowners have been satisfied with that. Any questions?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Did you have something else?
I was just going to just refer you to, if for corroboration, you have in the packet the proposal, and then you also have the remittance from the Estancia to the Homeowners Association that shows that they made a payment of $27,000. And just when speaking with staff about how we would provide evidence that this was completed, we were a little bit stuck because neither the Water Management District or the city required that as a permit, so we didn't have a CO or a final sent out for our inspection, so that's why Mr. Robinson is here. And then,
I'm finished. I'm just going to take any questions.
the last question, they hear the complete presentation and then they'll ask. So
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to add, so what we're trying to do, we appreciate that, we understand and appreciate the frustration that you all expressed last time that conditions weren't complied with and it was not clear whether conditions were complied with, and we have tried to make sure that that's not the case from the past and tried to make sure we complied with everything affirmatively, and just want to make sure that we get the exception use order, special exception use order, so we can continue doing business there. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions of applicant? I have one. Is the developer, the property owner, still the one in charge of the HOA?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Is the developer or the owner still in charge of the HOA?
Yes, ma'am. There's currently approximately 140 houses that are sold in Oviedo Forest. The total original number of lots is 197. The turnover is at 90%, which is about 175 homes. We currently have 20 houses under construction that are pre-sold, and we have 10 spec homes, which would make it close to the 170. So we're expecting that we'll be substantially sold out by the end of the year, and we anticipate that a turnover will occur at that time to the homeowners.
So at this point, the owner and the HOA are basically one and the same?
Well, they're not one of the same, but the owner does control, the developer, which is the declarant, by virtue of their rights as a declarant, does control the HOA, and they control the board of the HOA. So I'm not an elected member. I am actually elected, but I'm elected by the homeowner. Or by, excuse me.
By the homeowner?
No, I'm sorry, by the developer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Deborah, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a request for the PZA to recommend adoption of Resolution Number 2617-13, approving Special Exception Use Order Number 197-12 to allow a model home as a temporary sales office on Lot 73, 75, 87, and associated parking on Lot 92 of the Oviedo Forest development. And this is per Section 5.3B4 of the City of Oviedo Land Development Code. The applicant has just spoken. Her name is Cammie Culver with Foley and Lardner. On Thursday, January 10th, 2013, the DRC recommended adoption of Resolution Number 2617-13. The PZA considered Resolution Number 2713 at a public hearing on Tuesday, January 22nd, 2013. The PZA tabled consideration of Resolution 2617-13 to February 26, 2013, an effort to gather details from the applicant and staff on the conditions of approval for special exception use order number 190-10, which is the previous special exception use order. On Monday, February 18, 2013, City Council continued consideration of Resolution Number 2617-13 until a date uncertain. The applicant provided information on the conditions approved with Special Exception Use Order 190-10 and the Attachment 3. They've also represented to you tonight. They've gone over the conditions with their answers to those conditions. In reviewing the proposed Special Exception Use Order, Land Development Code Section 3.3B2 provides 7 criteria that must be addressed by the applicant for approval of the Special Exception Use Order. Staff has reviewed the application and finds that the applicant has met the 7 criteria. And in particular, I wanted to draw your attention to proper use of mitigative techniques. The items that are in there, you all have seen them from the last meeting, and those conditions include, and these are conditions that will be in the proposed special exception use order. And if you look at the first one, it says the property owner shall continue to ensure that all state and Florida handicapped accessibility requirements are incorporated into the model home sites. B is the property owner shall not construct more than 2 homes of the same model in the same elevation adjacent to each other within the subdivision. If there are 2 such homes next to each other, they must be constructed with different colors, and said homes are restricted to remain such different colors by this provision, which shall, as set forth herein, run with the land. It is prohibited to construct and market 2 homes in violation of this provision of this subsection. This provision shall be added to the Oviedo Forest subdivision covenant and restrictions. And these 2 items were from the previous special exception use order that staff is proposing to carry forward. I see that the applicant has provided the CC&Rs with that language in the CC&Rs, which is the 5th Amendment to the Declaration of Oviedo Forest, and so it looks as though it is recorded. Okay, so this one, staff was not aware that it was recorded. And then the third language that's in here, that will be in the proposed special exception use order, since it's already in the 5th Amendment and it's recorded, there's no need for it to be in as a condition in this special exception use order because it was met. And then the third condition would be the property owner shall provide and maintain a minimum of 3 small trees along the west property line of Lot 92 and improve the hedge along the northeast property line facing Bighorn Street using the latest edition of Florida-friendly plant list in Florida Yards and Neighborhood. That condition is also recommended to be included into the new special exception use order. So the recommendation is that PZA recommend adoption of Resolution 2617-13 with conditions 1 and 3. As condition number 2 has been satisfied. This concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff?
Question?
Yes.
Ms. Pierre, I was questioning on Lot 75, on the ADA compliance. that appears, it appears that it's corrected on the applicant's response. That looks like there's a sales office there. It would need to conform with commercial ADA versus residential ADA. Has staff looked at that model home as a unique requirement compared to the other model homes?
Our building department, in terms of the sidewalk, is that what you're talking about?
Toilets, restrooms inside the model home where the sales office is.
In terms of ADA accessibility, our building department, they're certified, there's a certified building official. He reviews the building permits for residential, and so they would determine if it's commercial or residential ADA compliance that they would need to comply with.
And this was listed as a commercial or a residential site when it was done?
When we look at it in our division, we look at it as a commercial. With the building department, I'm not sure if they look at it as commercial or residential when they're reviewing the building permit.
That's what I'm concerned about, whether there's a 5x5 turnaround in that bathroom in the sales office unit versus a traditional residential toilet.
I am not sure. It would be something that our building department would review.
I'm wondering if that should be, I don't know what the group feels, but the terminology in there doesn't clarify that that would be a commercial in that one unit, which would be different than the residentials in the other 3 model units, where you don't have to comply with the commercial regulations for bathrooms.
In terms of specifics, in terms of the actual interior of the building, that would be a function of our building department.
Okay.
And they are certified in what they do. I'm not sure if they would have considered it residential or commercial. When they send it to us, we look at it as a residential use inside of a residential subdivision. But we also look at it when it comes to us as it's not just a single-family home. It's a model home center. It's a sales center.
Do you have any other questions, Ms. Hughes? Okay. Are there any other questions of staff?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Wright?
One of the frustrations I think we had the last time was there was some questions regarding why it took so long for the special exception use to figure out that it was expired. And you guys provided us a procedure tonight on the dais that, kind of explains, and I'm looking at the first page, and the last bullet item says that upon a special exception use order having an expiration date 60 days prior to the expiration, that notifications are sent out. I think the documentation we had the last time was that the special exception was approved on March 2010, expired a year later, March 2011, but I think the first letter that I remember seeing go out was May 2012, and then a letter was sent out June 2012 to notify the owner that the exception had been expired, and I don't believe that they responded to it until code enforcement, who was represented at the last meeting, actually took action, and then they decided that it was time to renew the exception use. So I think we were just trying to find out why, where the disconnect was at that point. We didn't really get a great answer at that point. So that's the first question.
In terms of special exception use orders, we have, well, let's back up, not special exception use order. In terms of our regular development orders, we have a procedure in place where we notify developers when their orders are about to expire. Special exception use orders, we did not have a procedure in place at that time to notify applicants when their special exception use orders were about to expire. We do have that in place now. In terms of them responding, they did not respond until code enforcement sent a letter to them letting them know that they needed to reapply for the special exception use order.
Thank you. The other thing was one of our functions as a board was also to review the items that come before us, and we've given the option to add, change, modify criteria, or add conditions to the in this sense the order that they're requesting. on this one particular, we had specifically asked for the crosswalk to be placed more directly in line with the model homes across from each other, basically putting it on the opposite side of the intersection. Council still has options to remove that waiver, but in this case, or that condition, it went through with that condition, and what we were told last time is that what we had asked to have done was approved, never got put into place. So we were trying to determine how that change happens. Is that a staff, the applicant indicated tonight that staff in this case had determined that it was an unsafe or inappropriate location, so I guess we were trying to find some background onto why that was changed. We go through, obviously, a conversation and may come to some type of quorum, in a sense, on what we think should be done, and when it gets approved, we're trying to figure out why something we asked for doesn't get done. So
It's very, very rarely that this situation occurs. When it does occur, it's because there more than likely is safety issues involved. We have an inspector. The inspector goes out, and the inspector takes the conditions to see if those conditions are complied with. If there are any issues related to safety, he will run it. He will get an opinion from the engineer in terms of safety. So if the engineer feels that it is a safety issue, which in this case it was deemed to be a safety issue, then the conditions will change. If it's something aesthetic, those conditions don't change. But when it comes to safety and welfare, it does change. It can change.
do you, Ms. Beard, do you know why this was considered a safety issue?
It was considered, from the inspector, from what he has told me, it was considered to be a safety issue for ADA accessibility issues, as well as the crosswalk would have gone through the middle of the intersection into the driveway. So if someone was backing out of, let me look at the lots here. So if you look at lot 75 and 87, it's on attachment 1. The direction that it would have come from the opening from on lot 75, which you have colored pictures here. Let's see, there's no lot numbers on it. But going across from lot 75 to lot 87, you would have gone through the middle of the intersection there. And the inspector, along with the engineer, felt that it was safer to use existing crosswalks from 75 to 76, and then from 76 to 86, as opposed to going across the middle of the intersection, which could pose safety issues.
I mean, I understand, and I appreciate the response. I mean, I actually don't think that's the case. Personally, I think that the intersection, the crosswalk could have been placed at the opposite side of the intersection, just like it was, and it would have been in direct line, and there's nothing in this picture that shows it would have been a conflict. But I guess I'm more concerned that, as you said, it rarely happens, but, I just don't know that I'm comfortable with at least not being notified that if there's something in our conditions that we ask for that gets changed for safety issues, I'd like to be aware of it. I think
And we can do that.
I think that would be, something that would benefit us as a board. So,
Okay, that's not a problem. Staff can certainly bring those issues back to PZA and then back to City Council as well.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Ms. Pierre, are you saying then that the city engineer has the authority to override conditions that are listed in the special exception use order?
In this case, the city engineer and the inspector felt that it was unsafe. And yes, the condition that was in there was not complied with.
So the city engineer has the authority to alter an order?
Let's see what the code says. I believe the land use administrator has that authority. Hold on one second, let me just look for it. Okay, the authority is given to the land use administrator. It says to interpret the permissible, prohibited, and special exception land uses.
To interpret them. Doesn't say that he can amend them.
And in this case, it was a decision that was made, and the decision was based on safety issues.
Okay, I understand that part of it. My concern is that those types of decisions are being made, but yet nothing is being done to go back and amend the order. There's no memo saying that it was not safe. There's nothing, it's just, I remember somebody said this. There doesn't seem to be some logical way to follow through with this.
Well, as I just told Vice Chair Wright, we can bring those items back to the board the next time it happens, and so staff plans to do that.
Can I suggest that perhaps in the procedures for special exceptions, these new ones that we were handed tonight, that you add, the paragraph be added that if once the order has been entered, should there be some issue such as this where some condition is determined not to be a safe condition to be implemented, that there be a procedure in here for noting that?
Yes, ma'am, we can include that.
Whether it comes back before this board or council to be amended, or somehow or other it's attached to the order so that there's a logical way to follow it.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of
I
staff?
was just going to concur with you because it seems like there's no checks and balance. I mean, someone can, just change an opinion and not let the board know or city council know what's being done out in the field. I think that's an erroneous error on staff's part.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sheridan?
these are all housekeeping issues that I think we do need to take up, but I do not think the applicant needs to be here for the rest of this.
Are there other questions of staff? I have one, and perhaps it's more so for the applicant. Can you tell me, my understanding is Home Dynamics is was the applicant on the order that was entered in March of 2010. At what time did Estancia take over?
Estancia has been the landowner, and there were sharing of responsibilities. I might have to defer to Mr. Roberts to see what the timing of that was. I think essentially what you're seeing, Home Dynamics is still on site. They're selling, they're running the sales operation, but the landowner has now come in and taken responsibility for these conditions and is saying, we need this to get complied with. Let's get compliant. Let's do what we need to do, and let's make sure all our approvals are in order. And one thing, if I might take the liberty to suggest, that one thing that would be helpful for property owners is that you put an expiration date in the body of the resolution or the order that you're approving, so when someone pulls it out of a file and can look at it, they understand that it expires, because where it is, and I'm not saying it's the city's fault, I'm just offering a suggestion if you are looking at improving your procedures. The land development code says they're only good for this long, but that doesn't get incorporated into the approval. And in many jurisdictions, if there's an expiration date, it's actually in the body of the order that you received. So as a landowner, you take out your file, you've got your order, you think you're good with your model home center, and yes, it says in compliance with such and such of the code, but you're in California and you don't have a copy of that code, and so you don't know what that says. So that might be something, and I would not object to including an expiration date in the body of this resolution to assist in sort of that prompting of everybody and notice requirements. You can't, so that might be something that would be helpful.
I believe that is in the new one, the one to be entered. My understanding, last month was that, from staff, was that Home Dynamics was no longer there on site, but you're saying they are? Okay. Okay, thank you.
But as a landowner, we're stepping up to take responsibility for the approvals and the compliance for the approvals.
Thank you. Ms. Pierre, as to your suggestion to remove mitigative techniques B regarding whether two homes can look alike, because they have now added that to the CCRs. If we take this out, and as I said last time, I think a special exception use order is an odd place for this type of requirement anyway, since it does expire in a year. But if we remove that now, what is there in place to keep that in their CCRs? If that's not a requirement of the special exception use order, can they not go back and amend it tomorrow?
They can. They can go back and amend it tomorrow to remove it.
Okay.
They can.
And can you tell me why that condition was put in the special exception use order instead of a site development order or some other?
It was something that came out as a result of City Council. The City Attorney crafted the language, and City Council adopted it. It was something that came out at the City Council meeting.
But we don't know why it was put in this document instead of some other one?
Why it was put into this one? The site development order, there's nothing to amend for the site development order. All those approvals are already in place. They are actually constructing homes without any amendments to the development order that approved the subdivision. So there would be no other place to put this language in unless it's in this new special exception use order.
Okay. Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. What's the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sheridan.
I'm going to recommend that we recommend adoption of resolution number 2617-13 with all three of the conditions as written, not removing the second one.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lopez? Is there any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This item will come before the City Council on which day?
It's a date uncertain, so we'll have to schedule it for City Council.
Okay. Good luck. Okay, the next item on our agenda are discussion items. We don't have anything listed. Does anyone have anything we need to discuss at this time? Okay. Next item, future meeting dates, Tuesday, March 12th, Tuesday, March 26th, and Tuesday, April 9th. April 9th's a work session.
Yes, do you have that on your calendar? Do you have it there, Patty? Yes, it is a work session. It's a work session on our land development code. We're in the process of changing our code to be form-based. And so as a part of the amendments to the land development code, we're going to be doing a series of work sessions. So this is one of 3 work sessions that we will be doing with you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Motion carries. Stand adjourned.